To the casual observer, the purpose and theory behind the restoration of stone buildings would appear to be simple. Repair damaged stone where possible and replace where necessary. However, many threads must be brought together before the process can begin. Structural integrity and public safety are paramount. Cost and practicability can dictate procedures. Artistic faithfulness to the existing structure and the original work can conflict with new technological procedures and possibilities. On the job, these sometimes conflicting ideas must be sorted out on a practical level. Often different points of view can be presented by stonemasons and conservators. We personified these two points of view in a frank, no-holds-barred conversation between Robert Watt, renowned stonemason and president of RJW Jim Campbell, and David Edgar, his chief conservator.
John Ashurst, to me, is probably the modern day guru who brought together a whole bunch of stuff that I really admire. A lot of good information in a few books that he wrote with his wife and with other people. And one of the things that he says in one of the books, I can't remember which one, is that the architect should consult with his stonemason before making a decision.
That's this one, which I brought as a prop, because we've recently been having some very frank conversations. John Ashurst defines timing of replacement stones as stones which might or might not survive until the next scaffolding program, which I love because it's completely practical. Like there's nothing airy-fairy about this. There's always like repair programs.
That's
like,
that's the statement, full stop. Because what will happen is that scaffolding is really, really expensive, and it might be another 50 years or 75 years before it's going to go back up again.
So you need to be sure that you're doing enough, but not too much. And that's what a conservator defines, right? You just do enough. And he also says the estimated life of such stones must depend entirely on the experience of the architect and his masons, which
not one or the other.
I'm not sure in 2014 everyone agrees with that, but there you go. The architect and his masons who should use their knowledge collectively, I'm adding the collectively, to balance their concern for the building with the need to preserve for posterity as much original fabric as possible. So this paragraph there, I agree with all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that,
so do I.
Okay,
so there's a conservator and the stonemason agreeing, so that's a good start. So when I look at some of these examples, the one that springs to mind is the coping stones on the top. Coping stones are cornice stones on the tops of the walls, which are supporting the wall plates, which are also supporting the roof. Now, in phase one of the building, it was a no-brainer. A lot of these stones have been very badly damaged, either in the fire at the West Block or shifting time, badly put in anchors for the roof, perhaps, that blow the stones apart. But the cornices, I mean, they're destroyed in some cases. The whole top of them's come off. Now in phase one, we replaced nearly everything with a slab Dutchman.
So what you're talking about, the stones that sit at the head of the wall,
yes,
above this little cobble table,
thing,
and we can probably show a drawing from CAD. Maybe you can install that to show where they are on the wall. And often, due to stresses and strains from the weight of the roof, the loading, you see cracks often along bed lines, but in some cases against bed lines.
Vertical cracks,
and vertical cracks straight through these stones. So these stones are taking a lot of stress. I wouldn't say weathering. It's not weathering, it's stress.
Because they're covered by the roof.
Exactly.
For the most part.
So they're not extensively weathered, they're just stress fractured. So you've got all these pieces here, and all these pieces, you can remove by hand. You don't need to hit that with hammer and chisel. You can just lift all these pieces off, right? Because the roofers have taken the roof off, they've removed the load, and the whole thing breathed a sigh of relief. And we've got all this loose, almost shaly looking stuff on top.
Yeah.
Here's an example here. So
the crack's coming away.
And yeah, it's coming away, it's moving, it's travelling.
Right.
And in some cases, they're pretty amorphic looking, they're not.
But me as a stonemason, I mean, that's a no-brainer for me. Strip the top off of that, put a slab Dutchman on the top of it, so that the stone becomes whole again, or at least mostly whole again. And then there's the other thing about the engineering aspect of this. With the stones the way they are, completely unsound in my mind, you can't put a cramp anchor in there to tie back the wall to the building. So it seems to me that these should be replaced just out of common sense.
But Alright, so I get it, and I think any layperson watching this and any stonemason would say, "Are you kidding me?" Some stonemasons would say, "Throw it out," right? Because some wouldn't
And replace the whole thing.
Yeah, because some wouldn't like the idea of a Dutchman joining, because a stone that was once supposed to act as one is now acting as two, no matter how well you secure them. However, as a devil's advocate here, say you do get all those fragments, and say you blob all those fragments on
Glue them all together.
with an appropriate adhesive, not something nasty.
What we're using, we're using lime. Lime casing.
I'm a bit of a lime enthusiast, so normally if you can use, because obviously the stone behaves well with the lime mortar in the joints, so if you introduce lime mortar into the adhesive within stones themselves, I can't see there being any big issue. So
Right.
any lime-based
And
glue,
moisture's able to move back and forward through the.
so if you can find an
the
effective
glue.
lime-based glue like the lime casing we use at site, then I'm pretty happy with that.
Much
See,
better than epoxy, certainly.
I would say so, although again, this is the thing maybe the Conservator see, is that it's none of it's black and white, much better than epoxy. However, if no water would ever get near that,
The epoxy would be better.
there'd be no major issue, depending on the stresses and strains of the roof, you know. The thing is, if you use epoxy, then your next break is going to be, whatever, half an inch, 2 inches away from the current break, because the epoxy
epoxy's
joints,
not going to go.
yeah, strongly. You know that the next time it breaks, it's going to break in exactly the same place.
Yeah.
So the next phase of repair, nobody's going to find any stones in worse condition than you found them.
Right.
So I could quite happily live with gluing those pieces back on with lime casing if an engineer tells me, if an engineer tells me that maybe your anchor, instead of just dropping into the top 3 inches of this stone, if you dropped it 5 or 6 inches down
To get into the
to
original
get into
part
the
of the
meat
stone.
of the stone, then maybe those repairs are actually just filler material and almost just a form for the roof. So
let's imagine for a
so I
moment-
can live with a conservation repair there,
Right,
with
so-
the engineer's blessing.
With the engineer's
Yeah,
blessing.
yeah.
So let's imagine the engineer has given his blessing.
Okay.
And we know he did for the whole of phase one,
Yeah.
because we replaced all the stones
Yeah.
in phase one. Why would it change in phase two? Would the
I think
conservation
sometimes-
philosophy have to change
I
in
know
phase
for
two?
the fact, and I wouldn't ever name any of them, I know for the fact there were architects, specifically architects and the other architectural conservator, who've done the best job they honestly can do for the life of a project, and the scaffolds come down and they've gone.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say for certain that's happened here, but it was, for me, I was surprised at the aggressive level of replacements. We saw in phase one compared to what I know in the UK. Now I came here fresh from the UK, and I've always been aware of that. So the most I did in phase one to disagree would be to say, I'd get angry, but I'd say, I'd always say, but I understand, I'm coming from a different continent, and I know the weather's different, and the cultural values are different, you know. So I'll say my piece, but I won't necessarily.
We're talking
say
about the
it's wrong.
cultural values, and I agree with you. But that opens up another thing altogether, because most of the stuff that I know about the philosophy comes from Ruskin and from William Morris and SPAB, of course, the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings. Right?
Yeah, I like SPAB.
SPAB is great. I mean, and when you look at the things from SPAB, you can see, okay, this is why we're doing this. And Ruskin has this great architect that if you have a church wall falling over and you put a tree up against it to stop it falling, eventually the tree becomes part of the historic fabric as well.
I
And
agree.
it shouldn't be touched.
I won't say it shouldn't be touched, but you should consider not touching it.
See,
That's what you're doing.
me, the tree's gone, the wall comes down to the ground and gets rebuilt. That's the difference, right?
But you might not have to intervene. This is the big thing. Maybe this is the big thing. You don't always have to intervene. Like historically, right? All these great cathedrals, they weren't repaired from a conservation point of view. They were fixed because the next generation of masons thought they knew better than
20
the
years.
people. Yeah, that's terrible.
And it done more damage. I mean, Queen's Park, probably my favourite building in all of Canada, Queen's Park, with beautiful red sandstone, the Credit Valley sandstone, and it's a Richardson Romanesque building, so it's really, really solid looking. Now, a lot of the damage that was done in the 70s had caused more damage in the 20 years between the 70s and the 90s than the building from when it was built in 1885 till 1970.
So we can probably surmise from that if no one had gone near it in the bloody 70s,
it'd be all right.
it'd be alright.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. You don't always have to intervene. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So these damaged coping stones, now the roof has come off, and the stones have literally come off. So we should probably be doing something. And back in the UK, by the way, and it might be a monetary reason, we'd probably patch the top of this.
parge it.
Probably.
But you
Probably.
wouldn't
We'd
have
lay them all back on the wall,
Right.
and we'd probably parge them over.
even 2.5 inches thick.
Yeah, we would. But we'd be doing it in pretty soft mortar too, and there's people who don't like soft mortar because they don't think it can handle the climate. But if you were doing it in 2.5 inches thick, you just treat it as basically horizontal plastering, right?
Right, and you
So
still
you'd have your scratch coat with coarse aggregates in
Right.
it, and you come to a fine coat.
Top coat.
Yeah.
But you still have the caveat that your anchor had to go through the parging right into the, whatever was left
The
of the stone.
parging's just filling the void, just providing a form for the roof.
Right.
So-
And the other thing is, if I can just interject
Yeah.
here, the other thing is that the parging is probably going to be lime based, so it's going to be
Absolutely.
it'll be much better for the building than say a Sika.
And guess what? And now here's the funny thing. Guess what? As a conservator, as a conservation stonemason, not only do you know it's going to fail, you're glad it's going to fail because it's not going to damage that stone.
That stone.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is the interesting thing. You know, a stonemason wants to build forever. A conservator wants to see his work fail, preferentially to maintain the original material in its integral condition.
Right.
So that's a subtle difference as well. You know,
Yeah,
doesn't mean
there's
repairs
that.
can't be beautiful. But,
No, but at least, and of course the parging coat will go right onto the stone, so it's bonding to the stone. Whereas at the moment, I think we're going to have a bond break with a sheet of plastic and then seek it on top of it, which is not going to do anything.
And I've got to be clear, I think the Dutchman repairs are very successful.
Oh yeah,
I just,
Absolutely.
I'm a bit more equivocal. I can see
They
I can
solve
see
all the
different
problems.
angles, you
They
know?
solve the engineer's problem. They solve the roofer's problem because he's not having to come along. And it makes more sense to me because they're not being seen. They're being covered by that flashing coming off the top of the roof. The slab Dutchman makes all the sense in the world.
Now, from a UK angle, those slab Dutchmen probably cost a few quid, and if the client's trying to pinch pennies, I might understand why they go, hang on, well,
Well, that's a good point though.
although they work well, I could spend my money elsewhere.
But surely cost shouldn't be driving best practice.
Shouldn't, but it does back in the UK.
Well, hang on a second. This is the country's parliament buildings. Why would cost even come into it? It should surely it should be best masonry practice, safety, and any number of things before cost is even considered.
Yeah, cost's always a concern, no way. I mean, again, I've come from where in the UK we don't have a lot of money to spend even on the best buildings, and a lot of it's grant aided, and it does inform what you do. You presume there's not the money to do the best thing, so you come up with these make-do repairs, and you often learn that way. So
I'd rather do less repairs that were right, and then
Maybe.
go forward the next
Maybe.
year with something better. You know?
maybe, so that's the thing, we're guessing it because we don't know what the bean counters have in mind. But if we knew there was a certain budget, like usually on a smaller job, I would know there's a certain budget and we want to spend 80% of it up at the roof because it costs the most money to get the scaffold
Of course.
up there. And by the time we're at the bottom, we don't want to spend more than 10% of our budget. Now, on a smaller job, I'd be involved in those conversations.
Because you can always go back at the ground level or 10, 15 feet up and not have any problems.
Exactly.
But if you've got to get to 180 feet to fix something
Yeah, exactly.
after 20 years,
Yeah.
that's a different story altogether.
So normally on a smaller job, the Conservator would be involved in those conversations. And if it was a smaller job and we were involved in those conversations, maybe we wouldn't be shouting about them because maybe we'd get it. Maybe we'd say, okay, there's not an unlimited budget. This is going to be covered by the roof. So let's focus on things that are going to be exposed to all the other end.